Game over, man. Game over.
Johnny. You're gonna need a bigger potion.
So simple.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome back to the InSession Film Podcast. I am Ryan McQuaid.
And I'm Jay Ledbetter.
Thank you guys for coming back to the show and coming to this review of BEAU is Afraid, the most highly anticipated, controversial film probably out there right now, Jay, in the universe of the first half of the year at least, right?
People are saying it's a career killer.
I think we'll get a little bit into that, not too much into that. Don't want to give those arguments too much credence on this review, but Brendan's not here, JD's not here, so we get the lucky pleasure of talking about Ari Aster's latest film. Last time they had he had a film come out, Midsommar. We talked about that on Extra Film, and we got to really dive into that one fresh because I remember you had literally just left the movie theater and came home, and we did that review.
The best way to review an Ari Aster film, right after you see it.
Really, no time to think, just immediate thoughts. But no, we've had a little bit of time to stew on this one. I saw this I feel like I saw this 3 weeks ago. I want to say that's when I saw it. Had a really nice, when was it? Like April Fool's. Yeah, that's when I saw it. And you saw it when? Last week?
I saw it 3 days ago.
Okay. But it felt like last week.
Yes, sure.
Because it's a long movie. It's 3 hours long.
It is a long movie.
It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to process. A lot of people. I mean, Jay and I have been going back and forth with the guys, just kind of talking about a little bit about this vaguely because Brendan has not seen it. I don't believe JD's seen it yet either. But we're going to try our best to talk about this early up at the front without spoiling things. If we do get into a little bit of spoiler talks, we'll alert it, or we'll give you a heads up if you're listening. And for our visual audience, we'll do we'll wave our arms or something crazy up in the air. But Jay, this has been probably the most divisive film. I don't even think of just this year, maybe even last year too, right? It's pretty up there. It's in terms of the polarizing responses.
Definitely, unsurprisingly, I would say it has had a polarizing response, but the response is worth talking about in and of itself, in addition to the way that either of us think about the film. But it has certainly caused a lot of noise, especially for a movie of its size, leading up to its release.
I feel like we should talk about the film first, and then maybe towards the end talk about the reaction to this, because we do want to at least acknowledge some of that conversation, our thoughts about what we've been seeing from this movie. But obviously the movie comes first, the review comes first. And so BEAU is Afraid, which is from A24 and is the third film from Ari Aster, and of course stars Joaquin Phoenix, Patti LuPone, Amy Ryan, Nathan Lane, Parker Posey, Zoe Lister-Jones, and Stephen McKinley Henderson, and Richard Kind, and it's got a big cast.
Got
it's
Bill
a big
Hader
cast.
In there for 2 seconds.
Bill Hader in there for
Mark
a little.
Duplass in there for about 25 seconds. All these folks.
So it's got a lot of people in it. And the movie is as followed. Following a sudden accident with his mother, a mild-mannered but anxiety-riddled man confronts his darkest fears as he embarks on an epic odyssey back home. Had to kind of skirt around because even in the IMDb summation of this, there's a little bit of a spoiler there too. So, but we will get into probably some of that stuff. But Jay, Ari Aster, we've talked about him before.
Yeah.
Hereditary, a movie that you and I are a little bit more mixed on than the general public likes it. You know what I mean? A lot of people really love that film, especially Toni Collette's performance in that movie, which is a good performance. Don't get me wrong. And then Midsommar. I remember at the time we were both very high on that film, but I think if I'm not mistaken, you are a little bit more lukewarm on Midsommar now. I still am about the same with it. So
I've
I'm
cooled
very
on it.
curious. Yeah, I'm very curious for you. This is his third film now for you. Usually by this point, I think for most people whether he is either your guy or not. So I'm going to ask that right up at the front. What did you think of Beau is Afraid, and is Ari Aster finally your guy?
This is such an interesting kind of instance of, Ryan, you and I always talk about, I like that. Can't wait to see what they do next. And Aster has kind of been that, because you sort of
We
see
do that with
the
debuts a lot.
the build from Hereditary to Midsommar, and you're like, okay, I see the vision, I see the artistry here. There's a lot of craft here, and I went into this film expecting something very different. I expected a new version of Ari Aster, because it was clear from both the early responses to the film and then just the marketing materials in general that he was veering away from his pure horror sensibilities that he displayed in his first two feature films. But despite all of that, it turns out that I felt about Beau is Afraid the way I felt about his other films. I found it occasionally inspired, but mostly exhausting, overly explained, simplistic, and a little high on its own supply. And if that doesn't kind of explain the worst end of A24 style film in the year 2023, I don't really know what does. But
that's fair.
We talk so much about how big special effects driven blockbusters have taken over the medium of film, and I think in a macro view, I think that's true. But there's this very clear niche now of A24, like that kind of movie. Even if it's not necessarily an A24 film, you've had other studios come in here and create kind of A24-esque features like your Neons. But
they have kind of, in a lot of ways, Jay, they have become the new Miramax. They have
come to define a certain type
of
film.
Yes, they are the ones that are creating now a brand in a studio, and filmmakers that we love are coming from them and getting complete creative control with small budgets.
Yeah,
and then be able to then launch pad themselves to bigger things. They think of like Barry Jenkins, Ari Aster, Robert Eggers, Greta Gerwig, a lot of directors.
But Aster has been a person who has stayed in-house. The Safdie brothers are another.
Or the Daniels.
Yeah.
They did Swiss Army Man and now Everything Everywhere All at Once.
And I'm sure the Daniels are going to get to do pretty much whatever they want to do with their next film. So but this A24 pipeline is a real thing. And I will tell you one thing that I really realized at this film, which the screening that I went to it was both a press screening and sort of a quote unquote fan event, where it was kind of a self-selecting audience of people who knew that they wanted to see an Ari Aster movie could get access to this. People just a little bit younger than us freaking love Ari Aster. My God.
Really?
It was like a Beatles concert in there. And it was like a Beatles concert leaving the theater too. It was crazy.
Like they rushed, like they were like screaming when his name came
just
on
the
title,
enthusiasm coming into and leaving the theater from people who were just a little bit like mid 20s to 30-ish, maybe early 20s to 30. I was like, also known as your 20s. I was
also known as you're a dad now,
yes,
so everyone is younger.
I was
than
just
you
astonished by the praise that they were heaping upon just the idea of Ari Aster. And this film, it's a fascinating movie. We've got a ton to talk about with this thing, because I think some of it is really brilliant, and I think there is probably an hour 45-minute movie that I think is way, way better than what we get here. At one point, again, this was a fan event and a critic screening event, somebody flashed their cell phone up and the movie started at 7, and your eyes are drawn immediately to a cell phone whenever it pops up.
Yeah, it's like a moth to a flame.
I saw 9:07 and I was like, oh my God, there's still an hour of this movie left. Are you kidding me? That's unbelievable. And it is an Odyssean tale. It plays out
Yeah.
like this Homeric epic of interpersonal anxiety and self-doubt. But my question with the film is Aster really prescribing his prescription for all of these anxieties at the end of the film when we get to the big twist and the big reveal? It's so specific, but also reductive and sophomoric in its thematic origins that to me, it delegitimized so much of the formal cleverness that we had seen prior to it. And when you look back at all the breadcrumbs and things like that are really leading you to this grand finale, and you think about, oh, well, it all was inevitably going this way, and that's exactly the way that it went, and it's not incredibly revelatory or insightful, and you hate to say, it's like this 3-hour therapy session, but in this instance, it really doesn't feel like it applies to much more than this filmmaker kind of putting his thoughts out there. And there's a lot of value in that. But when it is this reductive in its origins of where these ideas are coming from and where it prescribes the character goes from the end of this story, I just didn't find there to be anything particularly philosophically insightful with this film at all, or even terribly emotionally engaging, because Aster he's one of those directors who presents everything in a fairly objective manner. There's a coldness and a distance, which I find can be very appealing with a lot of filmmakers, and especially in a film like this, where it is on its face so personal, but when it's presented in this almost standoffish kind of way at points, I find that very interesting. It's very combative, especially in the early points of the film where it's in this urban landscape where it is that the early parts of this film where we're in the big city and everything is just sort of, you talk about sophomoric. It's all this very juvenile humor and drawings and images and the name of the...
It's very heightened.
Yes, very, very heightened in pretty immature, but mostly funny ways. Although there is maybe an argument that, like, are all poor people evil in this movie? That might be the case. I don't know. Maybe little weird stuff going on there. But it's got a lot of ideas, which you have to admire, but you can't just give a movie credit for audacity. You have to look at what it's actually portraying and how it's going about that audacity. And for me, it was not successful in its depiction of its ideas. Especially when it gets so literal at the end of the movie. Oh my God, it gets so literal. It just explains everything that the movie's about at the end. It puts the entire movie on trial at the end of the movie is what it does, which not how I would have ended it personally.
Totally understand, Jay. Totally understand. I think that it is really fascinating what you're talking about there with these sort of age demographics that are really sort of clinging to Ari Aster. I think the reason why that is the case is because his last two films have been memeified in the culture. You look at Hereditary, that table scene with Toni Collette was essentially like just taken and put in memes, and that we see. I think every week I see at least something along the lines with her angry face at that dinner table scene, that clip, the photo, whatever. It's always on.
Every week somebody is saying, just a reminder, Toni Collette wasn't nominated for her performance in Hereditary.
For an Oscar. And I think then you combat that with Midsommar, which is you have another very memeified ending with Florence Pugh smiling. Also, Florence Pugh has become a giant star off of that film as well. The movie, I think, did like decently. money wise at the box office. It didn't do terrible, I don't believe. Maybe I'm wrong. I could totally be wrong on that, Jay. Look that up for me, please. But I think that they are definitely popular films for the fan base of people trying to attach themselves to a new director.
Did pretty well.
Yeah, how did it do?
48 mil on a $9 million budget.
That's pretty good.
Pretty good.
That's pretty good. That's a 5-time multiplier. I made money. But I think that Ari Aster, for me, Jay, he hasn't been my guy. I would lean more towards a guy that kind of came around the same time. I would lean a little bit more towards Robert Eggers.
I'm an Eggers guy. Absolutely.
Eggers to me is like a guy that like he takes swings, and I don't always 100% like Eggers has not made a 4.5 out of 5 or 5-star movie for me yet, but I see in his work the potential, and I am so jazzed for like Nosferatu that comes out, I think next year or the year after, or whatever. I'm so looking forward to that. Ari Aster, I'm not anticipating. I'm just curious what the hell it's going to be. But like if I don't get to it, like I know I'll get to it. I'll figure it out later. But if you chose me to go through, it's the old thing that that our friends over at Film Spotting do. If you could go into 2 theaters at the same time, right? And one of them is showing the next Ari Aster film, and one of them is showing the next Robert Eggers film. Where would you go? And then the other one ceases to exist. I'm going to probably go to the Robert Eggers movie 9 times out of 10. Okay.
After this, especially 1000%. You see that Northman? Come on now.
I did. You know what? The Northman has like, I need to watch that again.
It was a top 10er for me last
didn't get year. Yeah. And it was like top 25, I think, for me. And I never showed the wife. So maybe I'll get around to showing the Northman sometime this week. I know she really wanted to watch it. We just never got to it, but I own it, weirdly enough. But anyway, back to BEAU Is Afraid. Hereditary, I'm not a fan of. Midsommar, I like, and I still kind of like. I never got to see the extended version of that, and that's something that I can talk about here too.
$75 for the A24 Blu-ray of that.
Well, so here was the thing, Jay. A24 had a kind of a secret event that happened on April Fools. They said to everyone, "We're going to show you the extended cut of Midsommar." And no, they pulled the rug out from me and said, "Nope, we're showing BEAU Is Afraid instead." Which then everybody online was like, "I would have been pissed." It's like, no, you wouldn't have been pissed. Like it was like that was the start of this crazy thing with this movie coming out. It's like it all started on just like an innocent April Fool's sort of rug pull. We all saw it. We kind of all knew going into it. It might be that as well. Usually when my local reps are there, it kind of defeats the point. But anyway, great people. Then I watched this movie. So Jay, this movie is a roller coaster in that it has great highs and it has some very questionable lows for me. Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting about it, Jay, is you talk about some of the lows already that you've already talked about. My lows are different than your lows, I think.
Interesting.
Because there are parts of this movie that I think are some of the best things I've seen so far this year. And there are also things in here I say, that's where we could have cut. And it goes back to this sort of conversation that I've been seeing a lot and I was a part of and tweeted about literally the other day about a movie that's coming out later this year, Killers of the Flower Moon. Mm-hmm. And everybody's bitching and moaning about Killers of the Flower Moon. Everybody's complaining about the runtime of a movie they haven't seen.
A 3.5 hour Martin Scorsese movie. I mean,
yeah, a guy that's made those movies, a guy that's made movies like that, and we can trust that can handle a runtime and a epic story to that level. And as a guy that's seen all those films, as a guy that loves all those films, I can trust him. But anyway,
I saw some people saying, look, I saw what he did with The Irishman, and I don't think he can do. Excuse me? What?
Yeah, I saw that this week too. Yeah, it was real. Yeah, just I wanted to shake my head too. I didn't even want to go into those comments because I was like, that is you losing the point of that movie. The point of that movie is the length of the movie. It's about, I don't want to get into it. The point is that for that movie, I said clearly, I don't care how long it is going in. I can't judge whether something can be taken out of that movie, Jay, or not until I see it. And I've been hearing a lot about BEAU is Afraid before people saw it too, about like it's 3 hours long, or some people even said it might have been 4 hours long at one point. I can't judge the movie until then, but I guarantee you this, Jay, when I saw this movie, after I was done, I said, yes, I know exactly where 30 minutes can be cut out of this movie. And it's not, and it might even be longer than that.
But you can look back on it and say, yeah, that should have been shorter.
Yeah, because if yeah, probably. What was that? 2 hours and 20 minutes?
Oh, I think it was like 240. I think it was
right?
like long.
No, because the extended cut's like 3 hours. So I think it's like 240 or 230. I mean, 220, 230. Either way, or maybe it just felt like that. I think this movie is 2.5 hours. Okay, perfect. So not that far off adding 30 minutes here, but the problem is that I think that the runtime here, I understand why it is this long. It doesn't have to be this long. That's a difference. Like, I understand that Ari Aster wants you, put you in a state of existential dread. That's what this movie really feels like.
Overwhelm you.
But I'm nowhere feeling much different about how I'm supposed to feel here than I am in something like Midsommar and like something like even Hereditary. And I think that this is billed as a comedy. This is like the worst example of what a comedy could be at times, because I don't think that the movie's particularly funny all the way or darkly humorous, especially by the third act. I think that there are some shocking moments, but I don't think it's particularly like, haha, that's funny. It's just more wow and disturbing than anything else. I will say this though, Jay. The first hour and a half of this movie was a lot for me to get through. I didn't expect whatever the
second half more than the first half.
I think that once they get into the sequence in the forest and we get to those sequences, which I think is the best thing in the film, easily the best thing in the film.
I think the Amy Ryan, Nathan Lane stuff is the best thing in the movie.
That's exactly what I would cut out of this movie.
All the stuff with the kid in the movie.
Besides a couple of line deliveries by Nathan Lane.
It's really Nathan Lane. He is
it's really
out
Nathan
of this
Lane.
world
like,
good in this movie.
My dude?
Yes.
But I hated everything with the daughter character. And I thought it was so pointless and reductive. And just really thought that then on the whole, I don't really need this. And it doesn't really go anywhere to where this movie is actually trying to go, which is the end of this movie. Like, that is what this movie wants to be. And listen, is it a little bit on the nose? Yes, absolutely. It's on the nose.
When they do
the
literally
by the end
of BEAU, yeah, it's a little on the nose.
Is by the end of the movie, Jay, it completely ripping off a Matter of Life and Death, the Powell and Pressburger movie? Absolutely.
Well, I guess.
It was one of the films that he selected of the 10 films he recommended in New York City for this movie marathon or whatever. So yes, it was definitely on the mind for him.
I think that's a better film than this.
Oh yeah, miles better than this. But I still think that sequences in the middle, especially in the forest, I think the stuff with Parker Posey is pretty funny and shocking enough. And I do think that the stuff with Lapone and him at the house is great, because that's exactly what this movie is trying to be. When he's on the phone call, it's exactly what
it's so good right there, as a short film, and so disastrous in the context of what this movie is.
I agree with you though. The final scene of the film is, the more I've sat on it, the more I've just kind of looked back on it, and I've just been like, this could have ended so much better. You know what I mean? and it just becomes
Well, it just ties the
cooler
whole
than
movie
it
up
needs
into
to
this
be.
neat little trauma-driven
I don't even think it's neat.
bow. Yes. The ending of this
bow.
movie is entirely tidy thematically to the point of oversimplification and triteness, really. It's very simplistic in the way that it wraps itself up, in my opinion. And there might be some people who disagree with that, but
yeah. But I do think, though, that it is a very ambitious film at times, though, too.
sure.
I think that it is a movie that I don't fully think I 100%, even after this first viewing and everything, know exactly what 100% works for me, even because the things that I'm saying
Sure.
now, I think on a second viewing could not work, or they could work again, or
But are you
other things that didn't work for me.
to watch it again?
I am very compelled to watch this again, more than I am his previous films, because I think there are details in it enough. This is now the highest, I think, budgeted film in A24 history at $35 million. And I will give him that. He put
insane.
He put it all in there. There's no question about that. But the problem is, Jay, I don't want to be in this mood for at least 6 months. Like when we're in award season and maybe there's a rewatch, I think that's when I would watch it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go back to the theater and watch
this is A24's Oscar winner this year. BEAU is Afraid.
It's not. No.
I came home. I came home from this screening, and I'll take my wife to some screenings every now and then, and I just didn't really get the vibe that this was really going to be one that she would be interested in going to. And I came home and I said, if I had taken you to that movie, I think you would have divorced me. It is.
I told Megan
going
some of the things, and
we'll talk about the reaction to this film so far, and so far it's just been critics. God forbid what's going to happen when the cinema score for this thing comes out. The public gets their hands.
It's been a little bit odd. It's been a little bit of audiences too. Because
the South by audiences, and again some of these events.
No, we didn't see it at South by. We didn't see it at South by. It wasn't at South by.
It was like another fan event on April Fool's Day.
April Fools. Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know. They've done some,
No, they had a fan event for the IMAX. Yeah. Did you see it in the IMAX?
I saw it in IMAX. Yeah.
How did it look in the IMAX? Did it look good?
It looks good. Ari Aster makes good looking movies. And there's a lot to be said for that. I like movies that look really good. This movie looks really good. But it's not.
It's like when I say about some other films, then there's people talk. Yeah.
BEAU. But it's just I don't know. I find this movie and Ari Aster in general intensely frustrating, because I do see the talent. I do see what so many other people are seeing, but I just find him to be, from a storytelling perspective, just pretty straightforward and not offering a ton of nuance. The tension in this film, which you're supposed to feel the entire time, whether it's not that horror tension that you feel in something like a Hereditary or Midsommar, but it's this anxiety that you're supposed to be feeling. Mm-hmm. It's certainly in the beginning of the film, it's more along the lines of a Safdie Brothers kind of vibe, where it's just the overwhelming feeling of living in an urban environment at the beginning of this film, which he just can't really. He doesn't, to me, balance the comedy, the really, I'll use the word sophomoric again, comedy, and I don't mean that derogatorily. He's going for something.
No, that's just the style, that's
crude and crass and bold and brazen. And he's trying to counterbalance that with this idea of kind of personal anxiety through this lens of surrealism. You do feel this influence of There's a little bit of David Lynch here, and there are times where I was like, oh, I wish I was just watching a David Lynch movie instead. I wish I was watching Inland Empire right now, which is not something that anybody ever says at any point. But I was like, oh, Inland Empire, that'd be good to watch right now. But
I would not watch that movie over this. No.
But did you it's unfair to compare anybody to David Lynch, but when you're working with the kind of dream logic that this movie is working with, I think it's hard not to go to those places. And certainly David Lynch is a huge influence on Ari Aster. And I think
there's a level of I think there's like a level of absurdity that this movie has that is to the style of Lynch. Like we hate this phrase here, but Lynchian vibes are in this movie.
This is a movie that deserves that moniker.
Yes. As much as we hate saying it, it
is one of the most overused terms in film criticism, but this movie I think is worthy of that adjective.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that because I don't hate this movie. I don't dislike this movie. I actually liked a lot of it. It's so hard because the highs are very high, the lows are very low. But it doesn't mean that I end up on like a C here, because I do think that there is a lot of ambition in here. I do think that there is a technical craft that he has here that is elevated from his previous materials. It's great. He's great. And you know what? I say this, Jay, it's something that I give a pass to. I know you give a pass to. We give passes to this here a lot. Is I admire a director taking a big swing. I think that this is a swing, and we give him a lot because we don't get to see him a lot. You know what I mean? And I'll give A24 credit because I know others won't, because he is an ingrown house boy. He is theirs. He is their guy. He's made the money.
Raised him.
He's made them famous.
AAA.
Yeah, exactly. From the ground up. You know what I mean? He is a big league hitter for them.
He has
for
gone
their
through the farm system.
And I will say this is what he gets when he has success and when he wants to make something crazy and different than what he's done before. Tonally speaking, it's not much different. I think that you're right. It's a different kind of horror that we're feeling. It's that anxiety. I do hear a lot of the people that have already come out and sort of complained about it being like, this is a giant therapy session, or like, why couldn't he just call his therapist or whatever? And I think sometimes you just got to let it out. And unfortunately we're the audience, so we're going to feel it here. I will say though, I think it's another pretty committed and good performance by Joaquin Phoenix. I think Patti LuPone's pretty good. I think that Nathan Lane is good for his moments, but really the aesthetics
MVP,
of the movie.
Nathan Lane.
This is the one time. This is the one time where I feel like I'm on the difference between you and me. This is the inverse. It feels like of A Cure for Wellness. I think the aesthetics here are enough.
That's the movie I was thinking of when I said I love a movie that looks good, but I can look past some of its flaws.
And I'm looking past a lot of the narrative flaws, the on the nose bits as well, because I do think that, man, there are 30-minute sequences in here where I am just, I couldn't keep my mind, my eyes off it. I couldn't have my mind like stay focused because I was wondering where it was going, what it was meaning, trying to dissect it. I was so glad I didn't have to write a written review for this thing, because I feel like it's such a hard movie to encapsulate into words, really. I mean, we're kind of trying to do the best we can here, but overall, I mean, Jade, like this is Ari Aster for better or for worse, and I think it might be a lot more better than worse, and then therefore it's actually, I'm not saying it's his best, because I still think Midsommar is that, but it probably is going to be the one I go back to try to see if there's other elements or or things that I can take from to elevate this. Or it could be like what you did with Midsommar, which is like in 6 months I'm watching it again, and man, this movie doesn't age well, and downhill from there, but I didn't have that with Midsommar. I felt like that movie was focused enough. Like, you know what I mean? This one, it is more scatterbrained, and it is more of an endurance test for sure. Because I agree with you. I sat there with about 30 minutes left to go going, where the hell are we going with this? But I was so enthralled by that last hour and a half that I forgot about my watch. But yeah, the stuff at Nathan Lane and Amy Ryan's house just felt like it went on way too long for where this movie ends up going. I think
it's the best part of the movie.
Me.
That could have
but
been
it's
the
but
movie.
It doesn't really flow. But it doesn't really flow that well with the rest of it, I don't think.
Well, none of it flows together. It is, again, this Odyssean tale of different pieces coming together. I mean, it is entirely this story of Job, Homer's Odyssey story, right? Where it is very much this hero's journey of this man who is depressed and obsessed with his own lack of self-worth, and he views that in the end through the lens of his relationship with his mother, and that ends up being, at least in the eyes, that there are a couple ways to look at this movie, and we've been talking now for 35 minutes. I think we can start talking freely about the details of the plot of this movie. So, spoiler alert for any of you freaks who have made it this far without having seen
shaking our hands. So if you haven't seen Beau is Afraid, Jay's not going to do the hand.
And also shout out to A24 for giving me this Beau is Afraid t-shirt. Got your bow there.
Yeah,
there are a couple of ways to look at this film, right? Is the big twist of this film, which is that his mother, who he believes who died, is she truly alive and truly revealing that she is the mastermind of all of his misery? Or is the whole movie this idea that we are living inside the mind of Beau, and he is trying to justify his existence by saying that his misery is entirely because of his mother? And I think the movie is more interesting if it is the latter. I think if it is the former, you got an absolute hack job on your hands, just complete trite nonsense. And taking this film literally is a fool's errand for sure. But
I don't think you can take this movie literally.
No, you can't. But even still, if the whole film is about how this guy his life has caved in on itself, he is horrified of women, he is incapable of succeeding on any sort of professional level, he is incapable of forming healthy relationships with the people around him, he has rejected any opportunity at success, he is obsessed with this girl that he met when he was 13 or 12 or whatever he is in the flashback sequences on the cruise ship that we see. For that to all come from this very simple source of, oh, my mommy was mean and really pushed her ideas onto me, and because of that I am now this incredibly suppressed adult man. I find nothing interesting about that. There's nothing interesting about that because it explains itself far too overtly at the end of the film. And then to have this literal trial of his guilt at the end of the movie, to me, is just really hitting the nail on the head way, way, way too hard. And while I admire the ambition of exploring these ideas, these are ideas that cannot be easily explained. So trying to easily explain them is a fool's errand and is detrimental to the work of art that you're putting together. However fulfilling you may find it as an artist to try to prescribe um, a an origin to your own shortcomings or insecurities as a human being. It just doesn't work on film that way.
Yeah, that's a lot. Thank you, Ari Aster. Jay
It's a
Ledbetter.
lot, and there's
But,
something to be said for the fact that it is a lot.
It's a lot to take in, even coming from Jay. No, I think that this movie is. I don't take a lot of it seriously. I mean, obviously, I think that this is very much almost like a dream. You know, it really.
Do you like
feels
this
as if,
tempo of Aster? Do you like this pitch, or do you like horror Aster more?
I think I like this a little bit more because I think Horror Aster is a phony person.
Have you seen God, what's that? What's the short film? The truth about Johnsons, or what is it? Oh, what is it called? You know what I'm talking about?
His short film?
Is
it his short film?
Very well-known short film.
No, I've never seen that.
Do you know of it?
No.
The strange thing about the Johnsons.
Okay. What about it?
You're not familiar with it?
It's infamous for. No, I am not familiar with this. Thing.
Go. I've seen it. Go read about it. We're not going to talk about it here because you need to. It is not something we can talk about on this podcast. But I urge you to go and read the plot synopsis of that short film after we do this review, because that, to me, appears to be the kind of film that he is interested in making. And I think that's the direction he is moving in with this film. This very dark, disturbing film that is meant to. This has always kind of been my complaint with Ari Aster, is that he is trying to provoke just for the sake of provoking. It's provocation in service of nothing else. And the strange thing about the Johnsons, which is student film that he made, it's like 30 minutes long. It's truly cannot even talk about it here. Just go look it up. Maybe look it up while we're talking right now. But it is, to me, kind of the text of what Ari Aster's sensibilities really are, which are he cares as much about provoking you as much as he does being thoughtful, but he has this sensibility to him where he also wants to purvey this idea that he's trying to really make you think and be thought-provoking beyond just provoking you from a sensory perspective, shocking you in certain ways. And this, to me, is the third example of where he is doing this overly simplistic story while trying to convey that he is making something far more meaningful and nuanced than what's actually on the screen. And that all sort of originates in this strange thing about the Johnsons, which is on Letterboxd simply described as a dark domestic melodrama about the ties that bind and the ties that really bind, which is certainly very, very broad way of describing that very disturbing film that we cannot talk about on this podcast.
See, you should have never brought this up, because now I'm looking this up, and now all I can think about is this stupid thing. This is your damn fault.
So I'm reading. You read about what it's about now, correct?
This is the wild.
Yeah. I can't believe you didn't know. I can't believe you didn't know about this before. I've seen it.
Because I don't look into his life. I don't care.
This is the weird deep dives I do, Ryan. I can't help it.
I'm not in the short film life. Damn it. That's weird. I got to read this plot synopsis later. Not here, just out loud to you offline. And we'll talk about it offline, because no, please do not go and look that up. It is a disturbing premise. But unless you really, I guess Ari Aster's fans will love it. But no, okay. Getting that put aside, thank you, Jay. Because I honestly don't give a crap about that. Because I don't care about that, because I've never seen it. And
But
now
I
I'm
think
definitely
it's
not gonna
indicative of
see
who
it.
he is as an artist.
Sure, but I don't care.
And I don't
about
think
that.
he's evolved beyond that sensibility.
Sure, okay, that's fine. It's, you know what, Jay, you got me, because you're saying the exact same things that in a lot of ways is what I was talking about last year with somebody like Damon Chazelle in a
This
movie
is
about
very much Ari Aster's Babylon. I have a very hard
like,
time kind of convincing myself that Babylon good, Beau is Afraid bad, because it does. They do feel like these very messy, loud kind of. If this is the last thing that I get to make a movie about, this is what it's going to be, movies. And I really admire the fact that they got to make both of those films. I just think one of those films has something interesting to say, and one of them is very trite and uninteresting, and that is Beau is Afraid.
And that's Babylon. But probably two movies I really, honestly, if you're telling myself, I probably won't watch either one of them again for a long time, just because the conversation around them has been nauseating. But I will say this, like, for me, when I was watching the film, no, please don't.
I got the 4K. You own the 4K?
No, I don't own the 4K.
Whatever.
I'm not going to own the 4K of a movie. I gave
dog.
like two. I think I gave like 2 stars to that thing. I'm not going to.
Number 7 of the year.
Yeah. But no, I will say this, is that for me, as the more positive person on this review, damn it, I'm going to say that I think that yes, all of his movies have been very superficial when it comes down to the endings. I think Midsommar has the better ending. I think Hereditary's ending is far worse than even this, because like that movie's the whole movie gets undercut by the end of it. Terrible. And just like trying to go for a twist, like it's trying to like rip off almost like M. Night Shyamalan almost at the end, which is ridiculous. But like this movie's ending, the final set piece, yes, I don't like it. I think it loses a lot of the steam that it's sort of created from all the stuff inside the house, and I do find that fascinating, because then I do think it kind of does lean more towards the literal by the end. Or it just completely the anxiety completely confounds him. I think that this movie is literally the epitome of just having massive anxiety, and also even looking at it from the standpoint of even as like a white male, and thinking that everything's going to kill him, everyone's out to get me. The idea of that also too is it's kind of fascinating. And then thinking about your mortality at a certain point. Aster clearly thinks that, and I think that's where we get that fantastic middle sequence in the woods, where that play kind of turns within a play. There's a lot of stuff that may or may not be true with his father and things of that nature as well. But then it leads to this crescendo of like, what do you want to believe? If you as the audience want to believe, I think that it's kind of left up to the audience. If you want to believe that this is real, you're probably wrong. I think you're probably wrong, but if you want to take it as literal, fine. But I don't think that this movie is supposed to be taken literally. I think that that's the point of having anxiety, is that things are heightened to a point of absurdity. And when in all actuality, everything is fine. Everything is okay. There is nothing to be afraid of. Beau is afraid. It actually should be Beau isn't afraid, because of the fact that like at the end of it, he's probably fine. Like if this movie cut to at the end where he's like woken up in his bed, and it's the day before he's like, or like the morning of he's about to get on his flight to see his mom, I totally buy it, because it is a fever dream. It is something that feels like an absolute nightmare. And unfortunately, he's living it. And I don't think that Aster kind of leaves a back door for that, or maybe he does, and he'll talk about that, or he won't talk about it. It seems like a pretty, doesn't seem like a pretty open book when talking to him, because I saw a Q&A that he did with Emma Stone after the movie, and his answers were he didn't really want to give everything away, I think, just yet, which is actually not a smart idea, which is actually a smart idea. It's not the Darren Aronofsky approach. So let me just tell you what Mother's about. But
yeah, I'm way more in the David Lynch, Stanley Kubrick movie is about what you think it's about. Don't explain it. You know, it's
Yeah.
it'll mean way more to people if you don't tell them what they need to think about the movie.
Yeah. But honestly, Jay, I think that the movie, I don't think you can take it literal. And I think that that helps the film, because if you do take it literal, then if it is ultimately he comes out and said, no, this is like a literal thing, like this is really what's happening in the character in that moment, then I agree with you. It takes out a lot of the mystique. It takes out a lot of like the audience having to piece it together, rather than just the director saying, yep, everything's in the movie is real, by the way, there's a giant dick monster, and all this
That part was
the
terrible. God.
all, and yeah, the guy's gonna chase after him with an ankle detector and kill all these people and do all this stuff in the woods, and yeah, he's the sex scene is real, all this stuff, like it all feels very metaphorical. The thing about it is like, is the metaphor surface level then too? And I think yes, it is. I don't think it is. I don't think it's a profound look. I think it's a director trying to get every thought out of his head, and he's doing it in a way that I think is actually really inventive, really different, for him at least. And there are moments of pure beauty in this movie that I can't shake. That's the thing, is every time I want to tilt it to a negative or tilt it to this where you're at, Jay, essentially, I think of just like shots, and I think of lines of dialogue, and I think of Phoenix's performance, and I do think Patti LuPone is very good in this movie when she's in it. And I think of those things, and I'm like, I can't dismiss this movie all right now. I need to see it again before I finally put a stamp of approval on it. Or I say, you know what, Jay's right. And I think that that's okay. I think our rush to judgment on some movies is the downfall of us, because sometimes we go back and we think, you know what, I should have really given it this grade, or you know what, I shouldn't have given it that grade. And I think it's okay, even in a review like this, to be like, you know what, this is where I'm at right now. This is where I sit. A second viewing could help. A second viewing can make it worse. Who knows? I mean, shoot, Jay, if you watch this movie again, the second viewing, it might be better for you. It might be the opposite of what happened with Midsommar, where that movie got worse for you as when you saw it. You know what I mean? So I think that I'm comfortable in saying that I'm at a state of uncertainty, but I do know that I enjoyed it for the most part. I still would take 30 minutes out of this movie. There's no question about it. I would at least 30 minutes out of this movie. And I think you could still keep the tone and the vibe of what is going on in it, but, and have some shots that just, I mean, every shot could just stop lingering for the extra 2 seconds that it does. And you've got the movie a lot tighter.
That I don't even mind, but it's just again, to me, the Nathan Lane, Amy Ryan stuff, to me, that feels like something of a piece with the movie. And then it goes in these very different directions. And the movie that it really started reminding me of another movie. This movie I loathe much more than I dislike this movie, but Mother was just like, oh, we're going to be 7 different kinds of movies just because we can. And it got a little bit into that territory for me. It's not nearly as pretentious and self-important and hollow as Mother is to me. I think Mother is just garbage. But it does have.
I disagree, and you know that.
I know. But fortunately, Darren Aronofsky has told me everything that movie is about. So God bless him.
Honestly, I don't listen to Darren Aronofsky, so I'm fine with that.
It's a good
what he has to say.
Good advice to
it's
live
a good
by
bit to
at
have.
This point. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, did you know that The Whale is connection to Moby Dick? I don't think you knew that.
It's so funny that it's so funny that they call that movie The Whale, and the whale part is actually about Moby Dick and not about the large man in the movie. But everyone in America thinks that it's about the large person at the center of the movie, and obviously the title, it's got that on its mind a little bit, but it can't be that.
I mean, but if you didn't know that, the whale and Moby Dick were connected, then you can listen to Brendan Fraser's acceptance speech. You know,
That
for an
movie
Oscar.
stinks, right?
Yeah, the movie's not good.
That movie's worse than this
I
movie.
don't like that movie. Oh yeah, like I would take Beau Is Afraid. That's the other thing. Okay, I know that we're going to go on a side tangent, so we might as well talk about it a little bit. And then we can get back into the movie and wrap up and final thoughts. We got to talk about the way people are talking about this movie a little bit.
Yeah.
I think, Jay. We're not going to name names because I think that's not good. But I think I'm talking about this idea of the thing that's been floating around a lot with this is the idea of creative control and what audiences, or particularly even what it seems like critics or so-called critics, want from a movie out of this. I don't know what people thought they were going to get out of Beau Is Afraid. Even if you just watch the trailer, it suggests you're going to get exactly what you got. And this idea of conflating a movie like this with like the similarities to something like Guardians of the Galaxy or Super Mario Brothers makes absolutely a disingenuous bad faith argument of comparing apples and apples. They are completely different apples and completely different oranges. And so I don't know what you thought about it this week, but I thought it was completely just some of the worst habits we have as people talking about movies in general and thinking that it's one thing to dislike the film. It's another thing to go after a creative person and say this movie will, quote unquote, literally kill their career. Don't you think?
No, I mean, the big winner of the discourse around Beau Is Afraid is Oscar prognosticators, because they are now the second most obnoxious viewers of movies behind box office wallet watchers.
Would you count myself in that? Be careful.
No, well, you watch movies in many different ways, in addition to your Oscar prognostication. But there is now a more obnoxious tweet than, wow, just saw this movie, I think it has a chance at this, and this Oscar, or wow, this movie has no chance at awards. The more annoying version of that now is, wow, can't believe they gave this movie a $35 million budget. Nobody's going to like it, and it's going to make no money, which, to be fair, was one of the first things I said to our group chat when I saw this movie was, wow, don't know what I thought about that, but man, people are going to hate that, which is true, but that does not shade in any way my own personal opinions on the film. But to make that your foremost thought on a movie is, wow, saw this film, can't believe they thought that was going to make money. Who cares? I mean, who cares? It's a piece of art. It's very interesting to me, secondarily to the work of art itself, that they gave this movie $35 million, which is that weird middle ground budget that not many movies get anymore these days. And it is going to lose money. It was very funny to see the kind of rubber band of, whoa, this movie isn't going to make any money. And then, whoa, this movie set a record at the boutique box office in New York City. And I was like, I'm really glad that all the NYU students really had a good time with this movie. That's great. No one else is going to see it. I mean, this movie is it's going to lose money, and that's fine. And I hope that doesn't deter A24 from giving, in my opinion, better filmmakers this kind of freedom with their movies. Let's give the Safdie brothers $35 million. Let's give Robert Eggers, who I think, you know what I love is that Robert Eggers, despite The Northman not doing well at the box office, apparently has just swept up on VOD. Has apparently just done
that's the other,
buku bucks on VOD. So hopefully he'll get to keep doing what he wants to do.
But that's the other thing, Jay, is like, okay, I think by calling it something like this, having that buzz out there, the people that do that stuff, they're only making an audience want to see it more, to find out how obnoxious, how bad, because everybody loves a train wreck. You know, people love.
I don't think that's not
people.
No, it's definitely not a theater market. I hear this is terrible. Let's go check it out. That doesn't really play anymore.
People do it all the time, my friend. People do it all the time. They see They could keep driving on down the road, but they have to look at the car accident
tell
that's
that
on the
to,
opposite side
tell
of the
that to-
highway.
Tell that to Morbius. They made that the entire marketing campaign for Morbius, and they couldn't get it to work. So
But here's the thing. You knew Morbius was going to be bad. This is something that you know could be good, and somebody goes out there with a bad faith argument, and then you go, well, I already wanted to see it. Now I definitely have to see it. You know what I mean?
It could be. I know it could be
It
good
elevates
in the
it.
way that people like you or I watch movies. If I showed this to
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
next door neighbor, they would be like, "Yeah, of course I'm not going to see that. Who do you? I'm reporting you to the HOA. What are you talking about? Get out of here."
Do you have a good relationship with your next door neighbor?
Yeah, we're fine. But if I told them that, they'd report me to the HOA.
Yeah, and you don't want that. I mean, shoot, that's a lot of fines. But no, I think just imagining you going up to your neighbor being like, "You want to go to the movies, neighbor?" But I just think my neighbors are a bunch of like a couple of old ladies. So I'm thinking about like inviting them to this movie and how terrifying they would be of it. But no, I think this is that it it's kind of this movie is the perfect example of what James Gray talked about in that interview that went viral last year. You know what I'm talking about? Jay, where he talked about how every studio cannot think of a movie as if it's going to make $100 million.
Yeah. Great.
Some
great
movies
clip.
are gonna just flop.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And it's okay because that means you at least put in the effort to allow a creative person to try something, because if you don't, you're never going to know whether or not the next thing they do is going to be extremely successful. And they've given Ari Aster here a couple small budgets, and he's turned it. I mean, that's a $9 million dollar budget for Midsommar, and it made 45, right?
48.
That's or 48. That's a over
Yeah.
5-time multiplier. That's pretty good. You know what I mean? For a movie that's not made on an existing IP. Florence Pugh she got her Oscar nomination later that year, but she was not a star yet. She's not,
Hereditary
Miss
made
Florida?
83 million. That's pretty darn good.
On a what? Like a $5 million budget?
10. On a 10, actually. Surprised.
On a
at Josh
10?
Yeah.
So that's an 8-time multiplier. So why wouldn't they want to reward their director here that has made them money, that's done a good job? You know what I mean? And yeah, it's 35. They're probably not expecting. I mean, like if it just makes back its budget at the box office,
It's not going to, but that'd be great.
it's not going to. But if it did, it'd be a good story. But at the same
A24
token,
will give
though,
Ari Aster $15 million at the drop of a hat for his next movie. I have no doubt.
and that's fine, because
Yeah,
you want
it's
to know
good.
why? They came
Good.
off having the most successful year of their entire lives with The Whale and Everything Everywhere All at Once and Marcel and Pearl and X and all the movies that I could mention. They had a phenomenal year. They
Did
can
the Whale make
afford
money?
to do that. The Whale made a ton of money. Mel made a good amount of money, and that was another small budget.
Oh
You're
my
looking
God.
at it, aren't you? How much did it
55
make?
mil on a $3 million budget.
Exactly. They can afford to do this.
I mean,
And
they
that's what's
spend a
so
lot of
stupid,
money
because
when you account for awards. They spend a lot of money on marketing, but yeah.
not as much as you would think, Jay. Not as much as you would think. I know stuff behind the scenes. They did not do nearly as much because they got to build off of passion throughout the season for those two movies. Like Everything Everywhere was a sweeper. They didn't really need to do much ultimately in the end because people loved it. People loved Brendan Fraser.
Yeah.
They didn't have to do much. And the idea is that A24, they don't make money on this one. They've got probably 2 or 3 other movies that they'll come out this year that'll make enough money to recover the loss. They are fine. And then you talked about The Northman, which it wasn't then. That's Focus Features. But like Focus gave them a ton of money and they got it all back in VOD. I could see this movie getting some of its money back on VOD, plus then also any merchandise sales that they have. I mean, they are a brand within themselves. They are going to be fine. So this idea also too of like holding this box office standard as a deterrent of quality is ridiculous. Judge the film on the merits of what is on screen rather than how much was it to put it on screen. Because when you start doing that and thinking about it before you're even walking in the building, then you are having a bias going in as a critic, as a movie watcher in general.
Just looking at what 24's got coming up this year. Not a ton of stuff that I think is going to make
they have an enormous slate.
Money.
They've got a lot of
stuff that I think is going to make a lot of money. I don't really see it.
Okay. Inside Llewyn Davis. I don't see a lot of money there. But that's the thing. We don't know what's going to make a lot of money for them. Just let their movies come out and let it figure it out on their own. They have their
They're
audience.
doing fine. I'm not saying they're hurting by any means. They're doing just fine.
No. They can afford to let a creative come out, because I guarantee you this. They give the Daniels $35 million. They could easily be in the same boat. Like Swiss Army Man wasn't a giant hit like Everything Everywhere All at Once was. And that's the thing, is it's like, are we at the point now where it has to make Everything Everywhere All at Once money? Like that's a once in a generation kind of film. Model. Like it's ridiculous.
They're making
you know what I mean?
Probably almost as much money just on selling things that have A24 on them as movies, because people respect their respect for the artiste. And that's got value in and of itself. So that is, I do understand the calculation of this movie as this is us extending an olive branch to filmmakers saying, we're the studio that will let you do this. This is them saying to audiences, this is where you can find movies like this, with this sensibility to them, with this freedom other studios just aren't making. It's a brand stamp as much as anything else, and I respect them for letting him make the movie. I think at this point it's just safe to say I'm not an Ari Aster guy. It's just not one of my guys.
That's fine. But and you know what? That's
he's got
fine.
a very
that's
unique
okay.
sensibility, and he's not going to be for everybody.
No, and that's okay. But also, to try to kill someone's career, there are far worse films than BEAU is Afraid to
Ari
kill
Aster
somebody's
will be just
career
fine.
over.
He will be fine. He'll make
He
a
is
Marvel
going to be
movie.
fine. They literally already said he's going to make his next movie. No, he's doing his next movie with A24.
No, I know.
He's making a Western with Joaquin. You know what I mean?
Good.
You haven't really even talked about Joaquin that much in this movie.
Yeah, he's good. The one thing I truly cannot believe that the guy who plays young Joaquin is not CGI. He looks computer animated. It's astounding. Truly.
Really?
He looks like he was made by an AI.
Yeah, but
no,
AI making young Joaquin.
Joaquin is very good here because Joaquin is funny and certainly understands the movie that he is in. Again, the real MVP for me is Nathan Lane, because Nathan Lane, if you want to memeify it, understood the freaking assignment. He knew what he was tasked with doing in this film, and he was just hitting a home run with every single line that he was given. Joaquin is good here. Again, it's such a whiplash of a film tonally that I don't think Joaquin ever really gets to ground himself in the character. So for me, it's not going to be one of my favorite performances of the year, but I think he does as good as anybody I think could have done with what he's given. It's just a really, really hard thing.
Yeah. I think he's perfect for the role, honestly. It's
like a little weirdo.
You told me. Yeah, I think honestly though, for me, this is more. This harkens to like the kind of Joaquin performances I like. They're very emotionally driven. They're very quirky and weird and out there and different than a lot of other actors. I do think that for me, emotionally, that stuff in the middle, there's sort of like a stage play that turns into a fantasy sequence with these animated directors, which again, Jay, I'm going to tell you this right now already. This is the top 5 scene of the year for me. This is kind of what maybe I would want Ari Aster to explore more, this sort of different style of filmmaking than just that's where I truly felt more of the Odyssey storyline and the epicness of it and the scope and
that part was
the vastness.
Yeah. 100%. an interesting movie. I
Yeah,
don't know.
and no, but then I think that Lane's good. I think I do like Patty LuPone, Richard Kind. You can never have enough Richard Kind in your films. Stephen McKinley Henderson, I think, is really good and kind of what an amazing choice to be like a sinister sort of therapist.
He really
I
pays
thought
off
he was
at the
really good.
end.
Yeah,
The
his
reveal.
the smile that he has, that infectious
great.
smile of his,
He's great.
turns to
yeah,
it's turned to terrifyingness. I think that some of the younger performers, Jay, aren't particularly good, and I think that that's been a problem in outside of what is that? Is that Nat Wolf? I believe that was in the Hereditary. Young performers aren't really giving.
Oh no.
Or was it? Yeah, it was Alex Wolff. I'm sorry, Alex Wolff. Yeah, I thought Alex Wolff was good, was fine in that film. Obviously, Colette's like the MVP.
I thought the sister
but like
was not very good in Hereditary.
That's in that, yeah, and that's the sort of where I lean towards here. It's like these child performances really aren't giving me anything here to connect to those sequences. I really think a lot of those sequences could have been cut out, to be honest, as well. There's a lot of them that are sort of they're all very similar. And that's where I would cut some of this fat. This movie has fat. There's no question about that, Jay. I would cut, like I said, 30 to 40 minutes out of this movie. I'm even giving it 40 minutes now.
Movie
I cut
is a
this movie
bear.
down.
This movie needs to go into hibernation. Let some of that fat burn off.
But
over winter.
I still think that while this movie should be trimmed down and cut back a bit, I still think it was worth the experience. And I still think that overall, Aster created something here that is completely unique, especially to his sensibilities.
You're giving this thing
visually,
you're grading this thing on a curve. You admire this more than you like it, Mr. McQuaid.
I do. Visually speaking, I think it's Aster's best work. And I think overall, I think BEAU is Afraid will benefit more from repeat viewings rather than just one sitting. And I think that that's an okay thing to have for a movie, because sometimes they don't always click the first go round. I'm not saying, I'm just saying this one thing. It's a movie you love. I'm not comparing them. I'm just saying it happened for me, is that I saw The Matrix Resurrections and I was kind of confused about it. I didn't know where I stood on that movie. I rewatched that film like a week or two after it came out, and that movie totally recontextualized for me. And I think that this could be a movie that does that. I also think that this movie could be a movie where, like, in 6 months, I'm like, Jade, remember when we saw that? Yeah, that was a mistake. So I'm kind of in the middle of it right now, and I think that that's an okay place to be. But yeah, for once in my life, I can now be like Jay Ledbetter and be like, visually speaking, a movie carried it over the line more than narratively speaking for me, and I think that is okay in a movie like this for sure. So, Jay, any last thoughts you have on BEAU is Afraid? Any final details you want to give it before we get out of here?
Just weird little aside. This film, Ryan, have you finished watching Atlanta, the television program?
I have not finished watching Atlanta. No.
Well, I'm currently watching season 4 of Atlanta, finally. And the first episode of season 4 of Atlanta is about a trip to a shopping center in Atlanta called Atlantic Station that turns into a horror story, which is where I saw this film. And it was just very funny going to that theater a day after seeing that episode and thinking about living in the horror story of that episode of Atlanta, which is in itself a very Lynchian television program, surreal TV show. And then also the day after I saw this movie, I saw an episode of Atlanta, which is about a literal therapy session that captures many of the ideas that this film is trying to capture in a more literal setting, but in a more metaphorical sense, with more humor and potency than I thought this film did. So Atlanta ruined this movie for me. Thanks a lot, Donald Glover.
Well, as for me, I think the production design of this movie is pretty incredible. The scale of it is extraordinary. The score is pretty good for the most part too. Builds that eeriness. Again, technically speaking, this is one of the better films of the year too. I don't know if I'm really anticipating what Aster and Joaquin Phoenix are going to do next. I hope it's not a 3-hour movie, for God's sakes. But they're making a Western, Jay, and I do love Westerns. You do know that about me. So if they're making a Western, I'm kind of
It'll be no
interested in it.
Brothers.
Last time he made Joaquin made a Western, it was Sisters Brothers. So that kind of worked out. But it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I do want to just say to everybody out there, if you're interested, go give it a shot. Don't listen to even us here, or don't listen to a lot of the people that have been negative about it. If you want to see a movie, go see it. It's totally fine if you don't like it, but judge it for yourself. Go and dive into it.
Yes.
and see if you come out positive or negative or in the middle or whatnot. I think that is the perfect thing about this. In this movie, I agree with Jay. This movie, a lot of people aren't going to like. A lot of people are going to love. A lot of people will probably be in the middle. I've seen some people that have been in the middle about it. That is for sure. But ultimately, I think that is a good thing. If we all just have the same sort of machine-like products that are brought out every single week to the movie theaters, then I think that is a dire world to live in. And so that is the other thing about BEAU is Afraid that I could say, is that at least it is trying to do things that more conventional studios will not want to do. And I continue to applaud A24 along with Neon and a bunch of other studios for at least trying to go out and make movies like this. And again, I will say this, if this was Ari Aster's vision, I commend that. And I applaud a studio to let a director make the project they want to make and not meddle. At least they got to make that story. Whether or not you and IJ like it or not, 100% is the point of then seeing the film and seeing how we can react to it. But for all intents and purposes, he is an A24 guy. And yes, I'm still very much looking forward to Robert Eggers' next film, but I'm curious. I will be curious to see what that next film will be for Aster and Joaquin Phoenix. But BEAU is Afraid. It'll be in theaters this weekend. And by the time you're listening to this or whatever, it is probably playing at your local theater. I know JD we'll have thoughts on our Letterboxd page at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm. You can follow Brendan Cassidy on Letterboxd as well. He'll have thoughts when he see it. Very curious what they will think about it too, Jay, because of the fact that it's a movie that everybody will have an opinion on, and I'm curious about it. And I don't think anyone's opinion's really wrong on this one. Yeah, no one's really wrong.
If you're enough of a little freak to want to know what other people think about this movie before it comes out, go see it. Make up your own mind.
Yeah, make up your own mind. Don't let somebody that's been at the tanning salon way too many times make up that decision for you. If you want to also follow us on our opinions, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search InSession Film. And you can also email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com with all your thoughts on BEAU is Afraid. All right, Jay, that's it. That's our review of BEAU is Afraid. If you want to go and look up a review, we'll probably have one up on the website. We've got a ton of reviews up on the website. We have new episodes of the main show, new episodes of our movie series. We're going to have one coming out later this week, too. We're also going to have more women in session. We're going to have a ton of new stuff keep coming to InSession Film. Go check out the new website. The new website, it's a perfect place for you to go and see all that stuff. Patreon.com/InSessionFilm. Like, review, and subscribe here on YouTube. If you're one of our listeners, you can go and follow us on all the various places that you can download podcasts. And yeah, that's it. We will be back with a review of Happy Together. Jay and I will be talking about that film, and we'll also have, I believe, some other reviews coming out later this weekend and the main show as well. So with that, thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you all next time on the InSession Film Podcast. I was afraid.